This is Raise the Age. I'm Philip Sharp, and I want to welcome you to this video commentary. Today I want to talk about an article that was posted by CNN. In this article, it talked about the Portland protests, which, by the way, if you are not aware, have been going on for quite some time. This isn't like a one-day event, but it says that the Oregon governor releases plan to curb violence after shooting death. First, I want to commend the governor for finally recognizing that there was indeed violence in her state, and that's been continuing for quite some time, and that now she's taking efforts to actually combat the violence in her state. Good for you. I'm glad you figured that out. But what's the summary of this article that talks about her plan in? Like, what is it that she's going to do that's going to curb this violence that has now been recognized as being violence in her state? Well, the article goes on to say, and this is quoting Governor Kate Brown, of course, the governor of Oregon, that we must all come together, elected officials, community leaders, all of us, to stop the cycle of violence. Wow, if I knew it was that easy, we should have just done that earlier. So if everybody just gets together, the violence will stop? Wonderful. Well, I got a few questions about that. Why didn't you do that before if you knew that would work? I don't know. Do you really think it's going to work? I don't think so. I agree with the statement on principle, and I disagree with the statement on principle. I agree because, yes, as governor, you should have stopped the violence, but you haven't so far, until just recently. But I disagree with it because your plan is simply to get everybody together and talk about the violence, as if no one else is aware that it's even going on. You want to know the honest way in which you can stop violence? You just stop the violence. You're a governor, aren't you? You have resources and authority, don't you? You could have stopped the violence anytime you wanted to, but guess what? You didn't do it. The mayor, Ted Wheeler, could have stopped the violence in his city of Portland because he had the authority to do it and he had the resources to do it. But he didn't do it until recently. Well, for the mayor, I can see why he kind of turned it up a little bit since, they torched his apartment and kind of got his attention. And maybe he realized this is a little violent and maybe we need to curb this some. I'm glad you figured that out. Good for you. But the whole plan of the governor is simply everybody gets together. Like, you haven't been doing that the entire time? You're the governor of the state and you have honestly not been talking with everybody with what's going on and figuring out what could be done about it, that now you're going to do it? Well, that's what baffles me. The journalism of this piece is absolutely horrendous because in my mind, when I ask simple questions like who, what, when, where, why, and how, my question is, what's your plan? Because if that's your plan, that's a dismal failure. If that's your plan, Lord help us. It's not going to accomplish anything. That's not a plan. If anything, it's a preliminary to plans. Just getting together is what you do to form plans, but it is not a plan. But what really sparked this reaction, I wonder? Because again, it's not like there hasn't been violence there the whole time. It's only until just recently something happened that she figured she can just blame somebody else for the violence rather than the people actually doing the violence. And who would these awful people be that she could blame it on? Well, the far right. Apparently what happened, according to this article, is there was a fatal shooting of a man who was wearing a Patriot prayer hat by, someone from Antifa. So notice who shot who in this exchange. The guy that was shot, unarmed, but I just throw that out there since that's a consideration nowadays for, political speech. But who's the guilty party here in the eyes of the governor? Well, it's Patriot Prayer and all the militia groups that she says showed up in Portland, and that because they came in, there was this clash that took place. Because there was no violence before this by Antifa by any means. No. It was only when these groups showed up that all of a sudden this tension just broke out of control. That's absolutely horrendous. But that's the motivation for the sudden plan in which to fix the violence that apparently she's trying to say is now started by these far right-wing groups. So what is this group, Patriot Prayer? Well, from most sources that I've looked up on it, they immediately start with it as a far right-wing group. And some would say even an extremist group. And that's about it. And then it explains what happens with them and what they've been involved with. And it's more like nuanced than actual empirical observation. So again, poor journalism, shame on you. But nonetheless, Patriot Prayer is blamed now for the eruption of the violence. So now the governor has to step in and do something about it. She's quoted in the article as saying, "Every Oregonian has the right to express their views without fear of deadly violence. I will not allow Patriot Prayer and armed white supremacists to bring more bloodshed to our streets," as opposed to the bloodshed and the violence that has already been there prior to this. Do you see the twist that's being done here? It's only because they showed up that there was suddenly a problem with the violence in the streets. But then again, who are these groups? I've not seen any of these armed militias named yet. No suspect, nothing. There's like no information about them other than it's just the wave of a hand. Armed militia groups. Well, what groups? The only one I see named is Patriot Prayer. Now, who's Patriot Prayer? That's my question. Like I said, most sources that I've looked into lazily just say they're a far right-wing group. I mean, even Wikipedia has it. I expected to see, citation needed, but they actually put citations there. But I looked through all the citations in that write-up, and every one of them just cite other sites that just basically have copied and pasted from everyone else and said far right-wing group. But if I were to ask you what makes them a far right-wing group, I bet heads would explode. You wouldn't know. I don't think most people who use the term far right-wing even know what that even means. When they use the word fascist, they probably have no idea what that even means. I did a little bit digging into Patriot Prayer. In fact, I've even asked the founder of the group to be a guest on the show sometime in the future, and hopefully we will have that interview set up and get going. But whether he agrees or not is up to him, of course. But I have no problems in talking about it and getting to the root of things and what they actually believe and what's been going on, because we are getting a far slanted view of what's going on, and there's not even an attempt to look honest anymore. That's what's frustrating. I mean, Joey Gibson is the founder, and he's been asked specifically, and he has stated repeatedly that we are not a hate group. I looked through all their sources that I could find. I've seen no reference to hating any group whatsoever. I have seen nothing that would indicate any suspicion that this is a far right-wing group. So when all of these lazy journalists have labeled them as such, where's your evidence? Why did you come to that conclusion? I'll tell you how. Because you copied and pasted from somebody else, because you thought either it made a good story or you just wanted to believe it. But I don't see the evidence yet. Now, I'm not going to say they are or are not, but I will say this: I don't see the evidence. Until you can show it to me, I think it's wrong to label them far right when you have no idea probably what that even means in the political spectrum. In fact, there was a man named Jeremy Christian who tried to associate with this group, Patriot Prayer. He ended up stabbing some people, and he's serving some life sentences now because of that. But he was actually kicked out of Patriot Prayer because he was doing Nazi hand signals. And for that, Patriot Prayer threw him out. Now, if this was supposedly a far right-wing group, why did they throw him out for that? Maybe that's an indicator that they're not what everyone is saying they are. It makes you think about it. It should at least make you question the claims from people who don't even back up what they're saying. In fact, I want to show you this. It comes from the Patriot Prayer website. It says that Joey Gibson, who's the founder, is an advocate for freedom and believes it is imperative for followers of Christ to take the church into the streets, city councils, capitol buildings, courthouses, or anywhere we see injustices running unopposed, including Hong Kong, China. Wow, that just sounds extreme right-wing to me, doesn't it? I mean, let's look at that statement again. That's their goal. That's their objective. That's everything they're running on. That's why people have gathered around that organization. So what makes them far right-wing in that goal? It seems to me that if you're a follower of Christ, you must be far right-wing. If you want to bring the church and its influence into all aspects of the society around you like everyone else does with their things, then apparently you're far right. If you're against injustices that are going on in places to include Hong Kong, then you must be far right. If you're upset that the communist nation of China is breaking their promises to the people of Hong Kong when they incorporate it into it, and you don't like the crackdowns and you don't like the removal of political freedoms that they are experiencing, well, apparently you're far right. How dare you not support the communist government in Hong Kong? I mean, he even says that they're not a hate group, they want to exercise their free speech. I guess that makes you far right. I mean, he even goes on to say that silence is compliance. That if you allow these things to go on, you're part of the problem. Now, you know what? I've heard the left use that quite a bit, but apparently that makes you far right too. So I don't know how you reckon that in the scheme of things, but good luck with that. Good luck with that. Here's the reality. There have been groups on a rampage for quite a long time in places like Portland that have been left to do what they want by the authorities that be, and the only reason they didn't stop them is because they politically were aligned with them and refused to do their duty as mayor and governor. That's the bottom line. So when they talk about stopping the violence, they have no one to blame but themselves. If they never even made the attempt to do it until just recently, they can't blame anyone else. You can't say these other groups came in and started the violence. You can't say that the president started the violence or that's because of this or that. You let it go on unchecked for too long, and now you just won't admit it. So now you see this group show up and you're like, oh, that's why we have to step in, because these right-wing groups are getting involved. Well, here's the thing. If you and your proper authority will not defend the citizens like you're supposed to, after a while, they're going to start defending themselves. You might want to think about that the next time you let this go unabated and unchecked for a long period of time simply because you favor those people. That is not acting in your capacity. That is you failing in your proper role of governance. I hope you've enjoyed this commentary today. If you have, why don't you go ahead and subscribe and look forward to new content of these video commentaries that come out, and also for podcasts that are posted from Rage of the Age, where we interview guests and talk about things like politics, religion, history, and economics, and of course with a conservative bend.